My name is Judith Schlenter, and I'm going to talk about the planning of active and passive voice in German. And this is a project I'm working on together with my colleagues Sarah Dolscheid, Yulia Esaulova, Elyesa Seidel, and Martina Penke. So I just realized that I cannot continue to the next slide, but now I can. Okay. Yes. So in a production study combined with eye tracking, we recorded speakers' eye gaze while they described an event such as the one displayed here. So in English, there are basically two possibilities to describe the event. You can either produce an active SVO sentence or a passive sentence. The technique is not working properly, I realize. So I think you can't see the next slide, right? Now here it is, okay. And previous research has shown that priming the patient of the event by means of a perceptual cue can increase the production of passive voice. So here you can see a typical trial sequence from such a priming study. Here, a study conducted by Gleitman and colleagues. And participants see a fixation cross, followed by the perceptual prime presented at the position of the patient in the upcoming scene. And in the red bubbles here, you can see that priming studies in English increased the production of passives. And the effect of visual attention manipulation was found to be different in languages that have overt case marking, such as Finnish, Russian, and German. In these languages, speakers are considerably less inclined to produce passives. One reason for this might be that case marking languages, in contrast to English, also offer the possibility to produce object initial active sentences. In our study, we investigated how morphological case affects the description of transitive events and the tendency to produce passives or other non-canonical structures such as object initial active sentences. German is ideally suited for this investigation as it displays overt as well as covert case marking. In German, subject and object case are overtly and unambiguously marked on masculine nouns, but not on feminine nouns. You can see this here in the example. Here, the subject is nominative marked and the object is accusative marked. And here you can see that for the feminine nouns, the same determiner D precedes the subject and the object. This case syncretism for feminine nouns allows for testing the influence of explicit case marking on sentence production within one single language. So here you can see the corresponding active object initial sentences. And here the passive voice description. So our study aimed to explore whether and how overt and unambiguous case marking affects syntactic choice in sentence production. The necessity to overtly case mark the characters in a scene as subject or object might affect sentence planning, as it requires prior planning of the syntactic structure of the sentence to be produced. If there is no such need because case marking of subject and object is ambiguous, speakers may opt for a different strategy in sentence planning. This relates to two sentence planning strategies that have been discussed in the field. Following a hierarchical incremental strategy, a speaker starts with the relational encoding of the event, that is the relation between agent and patient. This then leads to the choice of a syntactic structure before words are inserted into this structure. The necessity to overtly case mark one of the characters as subject or object might require this type of sentence planning. Following a linear incremental strategy, a speaker starts with the encoding of the most accessible concept, which then becomes the first increment in the sentence to be uttered, and sentence production proceeds increment by increment. If the grammatical function of the first noun has not to be indicated by overt case marking, which is the case for feminine nouns, this may lead to linear planning. It has been suggested that eye tracking might provide an insight into which planning strategy is adopted. So here you can see an idealized graph for an active utterance, and this graph shall illustrate the eye gaze pattern expected for hierarchical planning. The red line indicates looks to the patient, the black line looks to the agent. As speakers reflect on relational encoding of the event, they may show no immediate preference for one referent over the other until shortly before speech onset, indicated by the dotted vertical line here. For our analysis, we chose an initial time window of 400 milliseconds based on previous research stating that indication for one of the two strategies should be visible within approximately 400 milliseconds. So here you can see the idealized graph for an SVO active utterance when following a linear incremental strategy. So what we expect here is that speakers immediately look to the character to be mentioned first. So our research questions were as follows. So we asked, does case marking affect syntactic choice, sentence planning latency as measured by speech onset times, and or eye gaze behavior? We predicted that speakers apply a hierarchical incremental planning strategy for unambiguous case marking, that is, for masculine nouns, and a linear incremental planning strategy for ambiguous case marking, that is, for feminine nouns. This should be visible through shorter SOTs for feminine nouns as compared to masculine nouns, and an immediate preference for the character to be mentioned first for feminine nouns, but not for masculine nouns. So, with regard to syntactic choice, we expected to elicit more non-canonical structures for feminine nouns as compared to masculine nouns. So here you can see our design and methods. So we tested 41 German native speakers. In our materials, we included 24 black and white pictures, half of them including 2 female characters and half of them including 2 male characters. We included 24 additional drawings displaying 2 figures or objects in different configurations, which should elicit different sentence structures and serve as fillers. So here you can see our procedure. So first, the fixation cross was presented for 500 milliseconds, followed by an explicit visual cue, here a red dot, shown at the position of the patient in the subsequent scene, and the scene was presented for 6,000 milliseconds. And the patient was always displayed to the left of the agent, as the patient's visual spatial position has been shown to increase the production of non-canonical structures. Participants' task was to describe the depicted event in one sentence. So let's come to the results. Here you can see the syntactic choice data. So for masculine nouns, we elicited 8% passives and no single active object initial sentence. For feminine nouns, we elicited 7% passives and again, no active OVS sentence. In a logistic regression model, we analyzed the effect of case ambiguity on the production of non-canonical structures. And our analysis revealed that there was no effect of case ambiguity on syntactic choice. So on this slide, you can see the results for the speech onset times. So the speech onset times are shown in milliseconds, and here on the x-axis, you can see the 2 utterance types, active and passive. The solid red line here indicates the feminine nouns, and the dashed blue line, the masculine nouns. And as you can see, participants were faster in producing an active utterance than a passive utterance. And this turned out to be significant. So analysis of speech onset times showed that speakers needed more time for the planning of a passive clause irrespective of case ambiguity. So due to the scarcity of the data, we had only 69 trials with passive utterances. Only the proportion of looks for the active utterance trials are shown here. So on the x-axis, you can see the time from scene onset, and the y-axis shows the proportion of looks to patient, here shown in color, and to the agent, shown in gray. For feminine nouns, these are the solid lines, and masculine nouns shown in dashed lines. The dotted vertical line here indicates the average speech onset. The two solid lines here indicate our analysis window. Please note that we primed the patient of the event scene. You can see this here, that at scene onset, there were more looks at the patient. And thus, speakers were more likely to fixation the patient here, and therefore we shifted the onset of our analysis window 200 milliseconds forwards to account for the time it takes to initiate a saccade. This is a typical procedure for eye tracking during listening experiments, and so we did this here to account for eye movement latency. And our analysis of this time window showed that there was no effect of case ambiguity on looks to patient and agent. So then, let's come to the conclusions. We saw that the necessity to overtly and unambiguously mark case on the sentence initial NP does not affect syntactic choice, sentence planning latency, and eye gaze behavior. Thus, our findings are consistent across measures. Hence, cross-linguistic differences in the production of non-canonical structures cannot be accounted for by the necessity to explicitly mark an NP as subject or object. German speakers have a strong preference to focus on the agent and to realize the agent as the subject of an active clause, even when their attention is directed to the patient by a visual cue. So, explicit visual cueing is less effective in eliciting non-canonical structures in German than in English. And the immediate preference for the agent indicated in eye gaze behavior points to linear incremental planning. So I thank you for your attention, and I'm very sorry for the delay in the technical problems. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
Thank you, Judith. So, are there any questions?
If I may,
Yes.
just a quick question. Very interesting, nice presentation, Dr. Schlenter. And I wonder if you could just say whether there was any actual difference, though, between the case where the agent was cued versus the patient was cued in the frequency of use of passive.
Oh, I'm sorry, that might have been, probably I haven't been that clear. We only cued the patient, so we had no agent cue condition.
I see.
In previous studies, researchers also cued the agent, but here we did not cue the agent because we already expected participants to produce more active sentences.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Julia also has a question.
Hi, Judith. Thank you for your talk.
Thank you.
So I was wondering, so your main conclusion is that the overt marking did not make a difference, right?
Exactly.
So I was wondering if you could speculate for us a bit what an alternative explanation might be. And I'd like to suggest one, which I don't know if it's actually been looked at because it's not really my field. So I was wondering in English whether where the agent and the patient occur, in which position in the sentence, definitely changes the meaning, right? But in German, if we have a sentence such as die Ärztin schlägt die Braut, and say we slightly change the emphasis and say die Ärztin schlägt die Braut, they mean two different things, but it's exactly the same sentence. So the position doesn't actually reliably cue the change in meaning. And whether that difference could have anything to do with the cross-linguistic differences.
Oh, many points you mentioned. So when you said the sentence, you used this contrastive focus. I guess this was intended. So here the participants produced the sentences, and so they, so there was no cue given by prosody or so. So yeah, what would be a good explanation for the cross-linguistic difference? So we saw that they have had this strong preference for SVO, so no single object initial sentence.
So there's more to do.
There is
Sorry,
definitely more to do.
Yeah.
To see what's the alternative explanation, why case marking languages do not show such a strong priming effect as studies on English have shown. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Have one more from Svetlana Karpova.
Hi, thank you very much for, I don't know whether you can hear me. Yes, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. So my question is, so you were checking overt case marking and plus combination of the gender feature, right? So the feminine gender feature. So my question is whether you were checking also the number feature. So all your sentences were in singular. So
Yes. It's also problematic if you show plural in eye tracking.
Yeah. Okay.
So one character versus a group of characters, for example.
Yeah. Okay. But what about the effect in the sentence if it was like if these sentences were in plural? Are you going to have the same effect, like feminine plus plural?
That's a good point. However, I don't know how to.
We have case syncretism in German in the plural too.
Yeah.
It would be, it's just D in the plural, doesn't change for nominative or accusative. Sorry for interrupting. So
no.
Just in the, it would be the same as in the feminine case. So we didn't do this because it's difficult for eye tracking to have, numerous persons on the screen.
Right, I see. Okay, thank you very much.